Hello and welcome to Crushing Comics, the show where I fall in love with my comic collection all over again. Let's go straight to the wall and see what we're going to be opening today. Oh boy, I need to keep making steady progress on this so the episodes will be regularly flowing. You know, a few episodes ago I was talking about my first exposure to comics, and I only talked about one of the two parts that I planned on talking about. So the first part was the idea that I had some comics lying around the house that weren't really my conscious decision to have. The second part is the first comic that I actually consciously decided to have, and that was X-Men 3, the relaunch of X-Men in 1991 by Chris Claremont and Jim Lee. I remember we were in a mall bookstore. I had to have been 10 years old, newly 10, and I was turning the spinner rack just out of boredom, and I saw that cover with all of the X-Men on it. This was before, I think, the animated series came out, because I remember I already knew who they were when the animated series came out. And I didn't really have an awareness of the X-Men. I don't think the arcade game was out yet. And I just remember seeing the cover and being like, look at all these women. Because I was really into strong female characters as a kid. Maybe it was because I was being raised by a single mom, or maybe because I had so many strong women in my family and in my life. But I just expected every set of toys, every comic book, every story to have female protagonists. And so I was turned off by when they didn't, and it really explains like a lot of the stuff I was into as a kid. Like, I didn't really like Transformers. Transformers didn't really have a lot of female characters. There's maybe like one lady Transformer. I liked G.I. Joe because they, with every couple of waves, would introduce a new female hero, and then she would become like my lead character in the G.I. Joes. And so when I saw that X-Men cover and it had Storm and Rogue and Jean and Psylocke, I was like, who are these people? How is this a kid story that has so many women on the team? I'm interested. And so I picked it up, and the rest, as they say, is history. Let's see what book this is. Oh boy. Okay. So this is Secret Wars 2. And it is one of the larger Marvel omnibuses. That's another big one. Secret Wars 2. So both Marvel and DC didn't really have the concept of company-wide events until the early 80s. And I'm not going to do the full history of that now because I suspect I'll want to do it when I pull out Secret Wars 1. But to give a little bit of context, Secret Wars 1 took all of the Marvel characters out of continuity for a split second. They like left their books and came back to their books in the same month. But Secret Wars was a year-long maxi series where all of the drama played out that would affect the characters. So Marvel had enormous success with that. It spawned a toy line that I have mentioned recently, and Marvel came back to the well and wanted to do it again with Secret Wars 2. But Marvel, always being Marvel, wanted to do it like bigger and make more money and include more things. So Secret Wars 2 was executed a little bit differently. Secret Wars 2 brought the Beyonder, who was from Secret Wars 1, but instead of having him sequester heroes on some kind of artificial planet, he actually came to Earth. And instead of taking away all the heroes and having the story be self-contained, this was really the first Marvel event that had this idea of being a sprawling crossover. There are only 9 issues of Secret Wars 2, but there are a ton of issues in this book because, as you can see, it tied into many different comic books. It tied into New Mutants, Captain America, Uncanny X-Men, Iron Man, Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Web of Spider-Man, or there was no Spider-Man adjectiveless at that point. Web of Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, Dazzler, Alpha Flight, Doctor Strange, Thing, pretty much the entire Marvel line, more or less, tied into it. And around this time also, Marvel was taking the opportunity to cancel a couple of long-running books who were their lowest tier of sellers and start to transform the line to what we all know who came to the hobby in the late 80s and early 90s of the speculator boom as the Marvel lineup we know. So some characters being phased out, like the Defenders. This does have an issue of Power Man and Iron Fist in it, but it's a relatively late issue. What's the other one? Oh, Shang-Chi. Things that were like getting phased out that had been around for a while. And in this version of the Beyonder, he's trying to learn about Earth and what it means to be human, since he somewhat succeeded and somewhat failed about learning human nature the first time around. What's really funny to me about this omnibus is that it's one of those ones that was so deeply discounted for so long, and this is just the nature of the Marvel Omnibus program. It was around for a while when I first started collecting in 2010, 2011. Nobody wanted it. Secret Wars 2 was not exactly the most high-demand event. People were probably a little bit surprised that Marvel even put it into an omnibus at the time. Secret Wars 1 at least has the excuse of being this like major classic that everybody fondly remembers and had toys of. Secret Wars 2 was this bloated sequel. And so this omnibus, you could get it, just for like so cheap, like 30 or 40 bucks for, its cover price, as all omnibuses had at the time, was $99, and usually you could get things like that first week for like 45% off, so to have it less than 50 bucks was a major discount. And nobody wanted it. And then the thing happens that happens with every Marvel omnibus. It went out of print, and suddenly everybody wanted it. Now here's the thing about out of print with omnibuses. Technically, this isn't also true for DC, but we'll get to that in a moment. Technically, no Marvel book is ever in print, because Marvel doesn't keep their books in print. The thing that Marvel does is they print some quantity, 5,000, 10,000, 30,000 of a book, and that's what they print. And then if the book sells through quickly and is successful, they may go back to a second print or a third print and keep it available, but they very rarely do that. They have a pretty good idea of what's going to sell, and they just print what they print. The one instance that has been disproven was the original issue of the Walt Simonson Thor omnibus. Marvel went back to press on that while it was still in the pre-order period because the demand was so high, and so that technically probably was still in print when it was released. So what do we mean when we say out of print as collectors of collected editions like omnibuses? We mean really no longer in stock at Diamond Distributors, which is the primary kind of only direct market distributor in the United States. So when something goes out of stock at Diamond, that means none of the direct market stores like comic book stores can reorder it, and so effectively it's out of print because we can't get more. Now that doesn't mean that there aren't copies of the book still around, even in the book market. Like Amazon could still have a few, while all of the comic stores we like to purchase from online are completely out. But comic fans are a pretty quick bunch to notice that sort of thing, and when there's a few copies left over at traditional retailers, they tend to get snapped up. So when I say DC doesn't necessarily subscribe to that, Dark Horse too, for that matter, DC and Dark Horse will actually frequently go back to print on their biggest books. Watchmen is a great example. DC will go back to print continuously on a Watchmen trade paperback. Occasionally they'll refresh the cover art and change up the edition a little, and you could see that in my Watchmen guide, but they effectively are just printing it continuously because they know it's going to continue to sell. And DC has a reputation for that. They probably have 10 or 20 books that they know will sell eternally, and so that they just go back to press all the time, and they never really go out of print, either in the traditional publishing sense or in the Marvel publishing sense. So this book was around for a while, nobody wanted it, and then it went out of stock, out of print, and suddenly everybody coveted it, and it became the hard one to find. So there's a lesson in that. It's kind of two lessons to learn. One is don't sleep on omnibuses. These things, especially from Marvel, are not meant to stick around for a long time. Most of them, if they're around for longer than a year in stock, will get liquidated so that Marvel doesn't have them in stock at Diamond anymore, and then they definitely are gone. So if you want one, you shouldn't wait too long to get it. But then the other side of that is, because there's that urge to like snap out and get the one that you want, you really need to think about, like, do I want this in my collection? Am I getting this because it's scarce and I'm having FOMO, fear of missing out? Or do I really want to read the story? And I'll tell you, I haven't read the story yet. I am happy it's in my collection because it's something I always wanted to read. It's something that completes my bookshelf of Marvel events. I have all of the Marvel events from the beginning to present day, or at least to the end of 2015, in oversized hardcover, and I like that bookshelf. I like it for reference, for show, and for reading. So I'm happy that I bought it, but as you're chasing down these omnibuses, you have to really watch out that you don't get tricked by their scarcity and the fear of missing out and just start buying every one, because then you kind of get chained to them. I think I've done a pretty good job about that, and the ones that I got chained to, you're really not going to see because I sold them before we moved to New Zealand, so I would not have to ship them around the world. But this is Secret Wars 2, and I'm very happy to have it. Perhaps one day we'll get to read it, although it's not at the top of my pile right now. And now let's have its ceremonial shelving. Here we go. You know, I haven't really started an events shelf. This might be... Well, I have some modern events we've unwrapped. But this might be the first classic event we've unwrapped, so I don't really have a home for it yet. When we open another one, I guess we'll have to designate a shelf. All right, I'm interrupting its ceremonial shelving. Here we go. Thank you so much for tuning into Crushing Comics and helping me fall in love with my comic collection all over again. Tune in for the next episode as I unwrap more books from this shelf as we try to conquer all of my wrapped omnibus oversized books. Thanks for watching.
Who I